على حب محمد وآل محمد الثانية لتعجيل فرج صاحب الزمان الثالثة بأعلى أصواتكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. We will continue our discussion from last night, and just a brief overview of what we discussed last night so that we can continue on the topic. We said that we will be looking at the path to Karbala, and we will try to analyze Imam Hussein's journey from Medina all the way to Karbala. And inshallah, in the next coming nights, we will try to use some of the particular stations where Imam had either given a speech or an action that he has done, a particular action, and then we try to see the perceptions of people of the Imam and then the reactions they had to that word or the action that the Imam has done. Just to briefly state what we said yesterday, to summarize it, we said that people knew who Imam Hussein was, either because of his lineage or because of his spiritual standing or because of his social standing as one of the most famous people of Arabia at the time. So everyone knew him very well. At least if they didn't know him, they knew of him. As simple as that. And then we mentioned that everyone knew who Yazid was, on the other hand. And we also said that while Hussein was the face of piety, the face of real Islam, the face of moderation, the face of peace, Yazid was very much the opposite. And everyone knew that. So people didn't have to be practicing Muslims in order for them to accept the message of Hussein. Just being a human being, as a normal human, even not following the word of Islam, you would be leaning towards Hussein anyway. So then the question is why they didn't, and why Hussein was killed on the day of Karbala, on the day of Ashura in Karbala, with 72 people. Actually, we can extend the question tonight and say if Imam Hussein wanted to really lead a revolution and he was looking for numbers, then why didn't he rise in Medina itself? Definitely everyone knew him in Medina better than anywhere else in the world. At the end of the day, he spent all his life there. He was born there. People there have seen the Prophet, have heard him, have seen the respect and the amount of trust that the Prophet had towards Hussein and his brother Hassan. They knew very well what Hussein was doing in everyday life. They've seen him on their markets. They've seen him in action. They've heard his speeches. They knew his father Ali. They knew his mother Fatima. They knew him very well. So you would expect the Imam to rise in the city where everyone knows him, rather than traveling all this distance to Iraq. Secondly, Imam actually, there is a stranger aspect to it. When he left Medina, he went to Mecca. He left Medina on the 28th day of Rajab, the year 60 after Hijrah. He went to Mecca and he stayed in Mecca for Sha'ban, Shahr Ramadan, Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah, and 8th day of Dhul Hajj. So he spent a few months there. Why didn't he start anything there? If it was a rebellion, he would have started where people are congregating. You don't start in the middle of desert. You don't leave Mecca, the city that had the biggest population in the Islamic world on that day. Why? Because it was during the pilgrimage, so everyone was coming for Hajj. And as inshallah, everyone that has been to Hajj here, you see it today, for example, with all the restrictions that is there for people traveling from especially Muslim countries, you still have millions of people attending. We have, for example, 5 million this year or the last year, or like the average for these years. 5 million participants in Hajj. That's not including the people who live in Mecca already. And that's with all the restrictions. And the Muslim Ummah now became the whole world, basically. Then at that time, you would have expected that a huge percentage of the Muslims, or at least a significant number of them, and by the way, we're talking about dedicated Muslims, because you wouldn't travel all the way to Mecca with all the heat and the difficulty of that time if you weren't dedicated, to be honest. So in that time, he didn't rise in Mecca either. And he actually left. So he didn't only leave Medina where everyone knew him very well, he also left Mecca where all the devotees were there, aiming where? Towards the desert. Some historians say, because he received some letters from Kufa saying, oh, you have 100,000 soldiers waiting for you. You have this many swords, turning in the skies and waiting for you to guide them. And as if the Imam cared about the numbers. If he cared about numbers, he wouldn't have, on the eve of Ashura, while he has only few companions left, and to be honest, we say 72 people were killed with him, take 18 out, which were his own family, you're not left with many. We're talking about 50, a bit more. 50 companions left with him, a man that has all of his family with him. He had his family with him. He had women and children with him. And no leader in the entire world, whatever you look at the history, does not take his women and children to fight. Doesn't make sense. Then on that night, on the eve of Ashura, where only 50 people left with him, he looks at them and says, I guarantee your status in paradise. I guarantee the same rewards that you will get if you're fighting or not tomorrow. And he looks away and says, leave me alone. They don't want you, they just want me. Why would you be killed for nothing? And he guarantees them the same level and the same reward and the same position in the heavens. So there's no more the perception of, okay, I'll follow the Imam or not. No, the Imam is giving you permission. Leave. So why would he, at that moment, even the 50 people who are left, he wants to tell them, go away. Because for the Imam Sallallahu Alaihi, and answering all these questions that we proposed, Imam did not want to gain any sort of power. It was not a political revolution in order for him to lead the world and become the king of the universe and to seek reform through political, let's say, revolution and political leadership change. What Imam wanted is the real change from within. What Imam wanted is for people to wake up. And when people wake up, then the whole system will collapse. If the Umayyads, and this is very important, if the Umayyads didn't have the people who were sick in the heart to put their orders into action, they could not have existed. If Yazid didn't have Shimr ibn Jawshan, Hussein wouldn't have been killed. It's as simple as that. If Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad wasn't the governor of Kufa, Hussein wouldn't have been killed. Yes, we do curse Yazid, but it's not only Yazid, he's the head of the chain. You have thousands of people. You have the lowest estimate of the army facing Imam Hussein on the day of Ashura, 30,000 soldiers. By the way, don't think of the armies at that time as paid personnel who have been trained and they are armies and they are employed and defense forces. There is no such a thing. They were just people coming with their own absolute choice. These are people who have willingly came to war. No one forced them. Yes, there are other forces in work, For example, how much money they paid them, or how much tribal loyalty there is, or how much pressure there is, or how much oppression their families would have faced. We're not talking about all of that, because these people willingly came to fight. They took arms against Imam Hussein alayhi salam, despite the fact they didn't have to. They had a choice. Anyway, so when Imam Sallallahu Alaihi decided to leave Medina, it all started from the death of Muawiyah. And Muawiyah, based on the peace treaty that he had with Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he was supposed to give the Khilafah, or the successorship, after him back to Imam Hassan. If Imam Hassan has died already, then he had to give it to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That was the agreement, and that was the peace treaty. That, by the way, when Muawiyah arrived in Kufa after signing that peace treaty, he grabbed it and he said, whatever of a peace treaty I have with Hassan is under my own foot. And he threw it on the ground and he stepped on it in front of everyone. And as I mentioned yesterday, he also said, oh, people of Iraq, I did not fight you so you pray or fast. I fought you so I can lead you or govern you. Now, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Yazid took the Khilafah, and he ordered his governor in Medina to take the bay'ah or allegiance from few individuals, but most importantly Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Hussein was left with two choices. Either he gives his allegiance and that's it, the end of the world. Umayyad takes power and that's it. It's end of Islam. It's end of Islam in its entirety. Even a very interesting example I'll give you, although we have a brief moment, so that you understand the perception of Bani Umayyah and their reaction to Islam. The Prime Minister of Muawiyah, his son narrates this story. He said every time he used to come back from the court, he used to tell me about how a great politician Muawiyah is, how smart he is, how wise he is. You know, he knows how to deal with people, he knows how to convince people, he knows how to win elections, let's put it this way. So, every day he used to come back and tell me all these great ideas. One day he came back, narrating about his father, the Prime Minister. He said he came back from Muawiyah's court, and he went into his own little place at home, and he didn't want to talk to anyone. So I went next to him and asked him, Father, every day you come back, you're full of joy, you're full of pride that you are aiding such a great politician, such a great leader. Today you came with a totally different perception. You're sad. He said, my son, today I realized that this man Muawiyah does not have a grain of belief in Islam in his heart. How? He said, I went to him, he was sitting down, he was relaxed, so I thought, alright, let me use this moment to put some mercy in his heart. I told him, Muawiyah, Ali is dead, Hassan is dead, Hussein is weakened, most of the Shia and companions of Ali are gone. What else do you want? Leave them alone. Let them live. He said he looked at me with anger and frustration, and he told me, I have fought like my father to bring this religion down, and wait till it's prayer time and you hear Muhammad's name 5 times a day. I want to stop till Muhammad's name is in the graves. That is narrated, by the way, by Sunni scholars as well. That's not narrated by Shia, because most of the history was written by them, not by us. So the amount of hate they had towards religion, it wasn't only because they didn't believe in it, or as we call it today, look, they had a choice, it was their personal opinion. It was beyond that. It was personal opinion, yes, but it was personal opinion that has gone to the extent of hate. That's one, and then another dimension is political power. And that's the problem. And that's why we have to remind ourselves, and we have to remind ourselves all the time, that we should be seeking the truth at all times. That when we are given a certain position, that this humbleness stays within us. This, let's say, how can I say it in a way that I don't attack any politicians? Let's have the flame of religion within us. The ethical conduct within our conduct at all times. Let's have a code of ethics for every single day of life, because we have no clue when will be the next, to be honest. As Sayyid Muhammad Ansari, the Shaheed, when he, in one of his speeches says, he goes, have we been given the power of Harun al-Rashid to not find ourselves murdering Musa ibn Ja'far? We haven't. Let's go through the exam and see what will happen to us. That's why we have to actually not look at history only from the perspective of I am reading a story, but actually to try to connect it to ourselves. Anyway, going back to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he did not accept to give allegiance to Yazid. And he said his famous statement, how can someone like me give allegiance to someone like him? It's simple. It's simple mathematical formula. How can someone like Hussein give allegiance to someone like Yazid? It doesn't work like that. It does not work. Then the question becomes why the Imams gave their allegiance to Khalifs after him. That was different because Imam Hussein made the stand public. He put the intentions and the message of Ahlul Bayt into the public eye. What Imam Hussein alayhi salam wanted from his movement is to put the word out in action. What he wanted people after him to remember that whatever you do, there is a rightness and there is wrongness, and you have to stand your ground. That's what he wanted. What he wanted is to lead by example. If he will be killed, if he will be slaughtered, if he will be turned into pieces, the most important thing for Imam Hussein alayhi salam was to teach next generations this lesson about the message of Islam. That intention counts, but action counts too. And that's the most important bit. So Imam Salamullah alayhi decided to leave Medina. And if you look at it very interestingly, when the Imam left Medina, he did not make it into a hiding, like escaping the country, let's say, escaping the prison without anyone knowing. He made it as public as possible. He started his journey by going next to the shrine of his grandfather, the Prophet ﷺ. He came out and he told people about the dream that he has seen. He's the grandfather of the Prophet, asking him to come to him as soon as possible. And all the meetings and all the leaders of Medina coming to him and asking him to stay and trying to ask him to not leave Medina, because where are you going? These guys will kill you anyway. But he made sure everyone publicly knew that he was leaving. The big question, if everyone knew that he was leaving, why no one followed him? Yes, we have many companions coming to him, the companions of the Prophet. And by the way, some of them are great companions as well. Coming to him, trying to talk him out of it. Try to change his mind. Try to convince him to stay back. But why they didn't go with her? That's a question. And that's a question that they have to ask themselves later. And especially if you see that after Imam Hussein's alayhi salam martyrdom, the revolution of the Tawabin, the revolution of Mukhtar, and all these revolutions that followed was because of the amount of guilt that these people had in their hearts about Hussein making it so public that he is going out. No one actually even considered it. I don't know if they did consider it because I wasn't living in their time, but at least no one put it in action. And that's why I would like to talk more about these people and their reaction to Imam Hussein alayhi salam for tonight, and then we continue on. If we actually look at all the population of the time when Imam Hussein alayhi salam started his revolution. So we're talking about when he started the revolution. You really can divide the Muslims' reaction to Imam's stance into three different categories. And I touched upon it last night a bit. The first division are these people who joined Hussein. By the way, we will divide these into three more groups, because either they joined Hussein by intention, they joined Hussein by action, or they joined Hussein otherwise. We'll talk about that. The second division are the people who actually fought against Hussein, so his opponents. Either they fought against him by coming and joining the army against him, or they did not actually do anything, or they actually helped some other way, either politically or, like for example Shuraih al-Qadi, who stood up on the Qasr of Imara, and he said on the palace of government of Kufa, and he said very clearly that Hussein was killed with the sword of his grandfather. How? I have no clue. The third division is the neutrals. Most people like to go into this category. I don't belong to this or that. It's like Abdullah ibn Umar. When Imam Ali alayhi salam was fighting Muawiyah, he used to say, look, I'm neutral. Bani Umayyah and Bani Hashim are fighting, none of my business. I'll sit at home. And that's why Abdullah ibn Umar, very interestingly, and possibly I shouldn't, he sent a letter to Yazid after the killing of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, telling him, swearing at Yazid, and telling him, you killed the best man in this world. And a bit of swearing, I don't want to go into that details. Yazid answered him, his reply was very short. If you want to swear at someone, swear at yourself and your father, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. Simple as that. You want to be neutral now? Suddenly you went neutral? So there are neutrals who are actually neutrals for other means. Inshallah, in the next coming nights, we'll try to go into each of these divisions and try to see their reaction to Imams rising from Medina, then the further developments from Mecca, and then all the way to Iraq. Imam Hussein alayhi salam had to farewell his grandfather, the Prophet. He had to farewell the city that he was brought up in. He had to farewell the memories of his mother Fatima. He had to farewell his own family. He had to farewell his brother that was left behind, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. And the most difficult of them all, he had to farewell his daughter, who was too sick to join them. Because Imam took all his children with him, except her. Her name is Fatima al-Alila, or Fatima the sick one, if you translate it to English. But sick rather that she was ill at the time when Imam Hussein alayhi salam left. So when Imam left Medina, his heart was still attached there, both physically and emotionally and spiritually. So Imam Hussein's journey alayhi salam was a journey of sadness from the start to the end, but it was a journey of many lessons. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.